Welcome, everybody. I hope you guys are having a good night. There's been a lot of questions about this particular topic. We, Sal and I, Sal from Two Cents Toys, who is here on the stream with us, we decided months ago, way back after Iconicon, that we wanted to talk about alternative archaeology, specifically Graham Hancock, things like that. And we both had a mutual interest in it, and we were planning it for quite a while. We did not anticipate that we would be doing this live stream the same week as a little dust up about the ancient archaeology show on Netflix with Graham Hancock, who we will be discussing in part, as well as the Indiana Jones 5 trailer dropping today. So, yeah, like timing couldn't be better. But Sal, how are you?
I'm very well.
Hello. Whoa! Oh my gosh, you're on camera.
Oh no, avert your gaze.
Wow. Okay, so everybody, this may or may not actually be Sal. It might be a digital construct from Disney, like an AI. So I don't know, but
it's the sentient last two brain cells I had to rub together that died watching the Indiana Jones trailer.
Oh my God. All right. Well, everybody, this is an unprecedented series of events. We've got the Graham Hancock show, dusting up controversy. We've got the Indiana Jones 5 trailer, and we've got Sal making his first on-camera appearance. Holy crap. So, Sal, first of all, you look like, I mean, in a good way, like you're dressed the way that's my jam right there. I didn't mean to sound like a Zoomer. Sorry. That's my style right there is what you've got on. I mean, you and I seem to be in sync with this.
I hope so. I feel that we're what are they, kindred spirits in this regard.
Yeah. I'm gonna turn off my stupid Facebook. I always forget to do that, and then it bling, and then anyway. All right. Well, I guess we need to kick it off by this says it's Ron Swanson.
I know more than you. That's not true. Melinda knows. She's one of the smartest people I know.
Well, Melinda wanted me to bring her up in the discussion tonight, and I think you and I are going to have a good chuckle about that. Jason Anderson says, wait, Sal isn't a pair of hands? No, he's not.
I'm more than my hands, god damn it.
He is
I'm more than just a pair of hands and a sultry voice.
He is a man of culture and mystery. Even though he's revealed his face, there are depths which have not been, I don't want to say plumbed. That doesn't sound good, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Well, I wanted to kick this off with a question, and the question to you is because there's a lot of people leading up to this who are asking me, like, are you going to go into, like, you know, aliens, you know, the whole History Channel meme and all that stuff. And I feel like, and you tell me where you are in this, but I feel like when History Channel lost its way and became a mockery of itself with that crap, it hurt the momentum of all of this legitimate stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
Am I off base there?
No, I find that actually to be kind of true. Not only I feel that giving aliens everything kind of undercuts our species.
Yeah,
and that we were incapable of doing things without them. Which it's like, I don't know, we do quite a lot of things without them now.
Yeah.
But also, it's speaking of aliens, the name escapes me, but there was someone who worked for OSI back in the 50s, 60s that was part of a disinformation campaign that would like actively go to these like UFO meetings and give just enough true information circled in a bunch of shit.
Right.
To give people so they'd spread it out and be like, oh, this is from our source inside. And then they would just be like, oh, well, that's not true because I lied. And so I feel that could be part of it. Maybe History Channel is like, we're tired of these alternative archaeology people. And we're just going to make a show to make them look dumb. So,
wow. I mean, I know how ubiquitous that dumb meme is with that weirdo who's like aliens. And I was never somebody that subscribed to those areas of alternate theory. I know X-Files really sent some of that through the stratosphere, and Indiana Jones 4 didn't help in that regard. Although thankfully that movie's largely disregarded. But I did want to find out first and foremost, how you got connected to this kind of scholarship and these kinds of alternate theories, and where the on-ramp was for you.
So the on-ramp was a Disney movie called Atlantis.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That hit right at the sweet spot when I was like 10, 12, something like that. And so Atlantis has, been in my heart and mind ever since. It's that one place that we have yet to find. And
yeah,
I hold out hope that we'll one day find it. Now, we can go into what I think Atlantis is versus like what it like. It's a whole thing. Like, sure, I'm getting ahead of myself, but all I have to say about Atlantis really is that Troy was a myth until they found it.
Right.
So,
yes. And it was connected to the same. It was connected to the
right.
same documents and chronicles and everything else, and we assumed out of hand that it wasn't real, and then it was. Yeah. So you super chats here. Bradshaw Studios, thank you for the super chat. He says hello from Bend, Oregon. Well, hello, sir. Oh, Cute Fluff is here with 3 squares. And then Scott Hughes, thank you for the super chat. He says, just because of this unprecedented reveal, I feel like I'm watching the moon landing and seeing Sal.
I'll take the moon landing over any of the other like major catastrophes that we've experienced. So
yeah, there are going to be no moon landing conspiracy theories here tonight. We're talking about ancient archaeology. Don't worry, everybody. Don't panic.
Actually, we knew that the face reveal was fake because the flag in the background was not moving.
I'm curious
in a vacuum, but okay.
I'm curious to find out, given that you started with Disney's Atlantis as like the trigger for you getting interested in this stuff. Had you already seen, or maybe you had not yet seen, Stargate? Because I know it does the aliens thing,
right.
but the opening of the movie is very compelling.
I was familiar with Stargate. That came out when I was in kindergarten. I remember it distinctly because Valentine's Day, I got a Valentine's Day card from Stargate, which is a very weird thing for them to market. But yeah, I had that, so I know it was around. But I didn't see Stargate till I was late high school, maybe sophomore year of college.
Right.
So,
you're welcome, Derek. Have a good lunch. And Scuba Pete, thank you so much. Just popping in. Much love to you guys. Much love to you, sir. And then Laser Pants is here. Whoa, hey, Sal.
Hello, Ryan. All the people who have seen me before are the ones that are the most excited.
Well, I mean, all right. So much like you, there was a seminal moment where it was a piece of audio visual. It wasn't me like picking up a book and turning to a certain page, like you with the Atlantis film, which I then of course also ran out and saw when Disney made it because same interests. I saw a documentary back when I can't remember if I was in high school or if it was all the way back when I was a kid in Nashville, but I think I want to say it was the early 90s. I could be wrong. I can't remember, but it was the first sort of news story expose that I don't remember if it was 60 Minutes or Dateline or whoever. They interviewed Graham Hancock about the Ark of the Covenant. And it was all about him talking about his experiences accidentally as a journalist in Africa and happening upon some of this information. And Raiders of the Lost Ark had just come out a few months before. This was 1981, 82. And he was relating this story about how he had been doing journalism work in war-torn Ethiopia, where there was this whole myth of the Ark of the Covenant in their culture. It was embedded in their culture. They wasn't a myth to them. It was very real. And so there was this whole documentary, news story, whatever you want to call it, about it. And did we lose you, Sal? Oh, no.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. And I was like, oh, no.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
Antonio, thank you for the super chat. He says, I must be feeling woozy. I'm seeing double the normal amount of epaulets. I mean, they're coming back.
Thank you for calling them epaulets, not shoulder straps, like I've heard people say before.
Yeah. Holy crap. Sal isn't just a disembodied voice. Master Son 42. I just got here and something is not right. Anyway, and I didn't remember necessarily the guy's name, and then a few years pass, but I was always thinking about that documentary with that guy. Like it was because I was like, oh yeah, the Ark. There's a theory it's in Ethiopia, and then I went and looked it up on the internet when I got the internet in college, and I was like, Ark of the Covenant theories, Ethiopia, and I found quickly Graham Hancock signing the seal, and I ran out and I picked up the book. And I read it, and at first I thought, I was like, I always walk into a room thinking I'm the stupidest person there. So when I'm approaching a book like this, I'm always thinking, well, I'm not an archaeologist. I'm only an amateur historian. I'm not going to be able to understand what's going on in this book. It'll probably be the cure for insomnia for me. Like and I read it from cover to cover, and it was so interesting. It was, and it wasn't bullshit. Like it was taking real things and looking at them in a way that conventional historians had not, done. And I don't mean to dominate the conversation here for a moment, but I just wanted to point that out, that you correct me if I'm wrong, but what Sal and I think we both are interested in are people who look at things credibly and put together legitimate connections and inspire thought. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's a lot of it is it's as Gandalf says, questions that need answering. Because there's enough, like there's the established lore, for the lack of a better word, the established understanding of how these things work, but there's enough kind of big question marks that seem to just get kind of glossed over.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
Graham Hancock, by his own admission, he says, I'm not a historian. He's like, I'm not an archaeologist, I'm a journalist.
Yep.
And it's like, so he's not trying to say like, I know more than all these people. He's just saying there's some big question marks here that people just don't seem to want to acknowledge.
Yeah.
So
it was shocking because when I read this book, it was when I went to the bookstore to get it, I noticed other books by him that were sitting right there on the shelf. This was back when the world still had a lot of bookstores, and you could go there and they actually had a good selection, and it wasn't just one shelf at a Walmart somewhere. It was anyway. And that was when I saw that he had written this book that just really piqued my interest, Fingerprints of the Gods. And I'm like, wait a second, what is this? And I started really digging into it because it was more about Egyptology and the history of the, North African part of the continent and all that mysterious stuff. And what I liked about it was, and I don't know if this is something that you noticed as well, but when I was reading his stuff, I was always worried that I was about to turn a page and he was going to go, aliens. And he never does that. Like he never once says, I think it was extraterrestrials. I think it was ET. He has total faith in the human condition, like based on his historical research. He's not a whack job. Like I know I'm waffling a little bit because my brain is overloaded, but that was when I learned about people like Zahi Hawass. And I always try to be respectful of authority. But when I started watching Zahi Hawass in both his own specials, his own lectures, and then seeing how he interacted or refused to interact with people like Graham Hancock, I just started to ask myself, is this another example of the establishment needlessly trying to shut people out? Like we're going to dogmatically pursue one avenue, and nobody's allowed to ask questions.
Right. The last time that happened, I think it was called the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So anyway, I feel like I've been dominating this conversation. So after you saw Atlantis, what was like your next step? Like where'd you go next?
My next step was probably to go back to school. That might have been a school day. No. So after Atlantis, it was kind of a dry spell. We didn't have a computer or the internet or really
Mhm.
anything. So it was kind of like go to the library and look for a book. And it was kind of beyond my grasp as a
Mhm.
kid. 'Cause it's like, oh, like I'd wanted to be, I didn't know they were called anthropologists at the
Mhm.
time. I just wanted to be someone who dug in the dirt and
Yep.
looked for things. Um, as my dad will tell you, I took a shovel to the backyard many times. He was not happy about that because we had a push mower. So, because I would dig a hole and not fill it back in. I found a tree root once, was convinced that it was a pot that was in the ground. Um, so, bright, bright kid, big brain energy. Um, but yeah, it was kind of a dry spell really until YouTube, pretty much.
Mhm.
I just got really interested in Atlantis and fell down a rabbit hole quickly, probably 3, 4 years ago. In combination of things like Indiana Jones and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff,
Yeah.
or the librarian,
Yes.
different things like that. But they take it and kind of go their own route with it, which is fine.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was mostly Atlantis, and I found all these videos, and then I quickly found about like Göbekli Tepe and all
Mhm.
these kind of people whom I would consider credible. Like
Mhm.
they're like woo woo people,
Right.
and they have like enough kind of like there's something going on here. There's a few channels I watch, like the Y Files or John Scott or Joe Scott rather, and it's enough where they're like, there's a lot of historians who say it takes 10,000 years for a civilization to develop, and humans have been on the planet for 300,000 years.
Right.
So that's a lot of tens of thousands of years that
Mhm.
civilizations could come and go. And started learning about like sedentary levels, like dirt and
Mhm.
all that, and how there are places on the planet where it's like inverted, where
Yeah.
like the oldest dirt is on top and the newest is on the bottom somehow, and just kind of I don't know, a lot of things that just kind of pique your interest, I guess. But specifically with Atlantis, I've always had weird dreams. I guess I had dreams about Atlantis and wanted to find it and all that kind of shit. I'm starting to sound like one of those whack job people.
No.
My For those who are unaware, I'm still on night shift, so I woke up about half an hour ago.
Oh,
But
I'm sorry.
no, it's not your fault. Such is the curse. But um, no, it was. I don't know. It just there were a lot of things in the Plato myth that just I feel like it's taken on its own legs, and people have Atlantis in their own mind about being an island specifically, and it's like it's never mentioned as an island.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
also part of it said Atlantis was one of 10 kingdoms that were part of Atlantis. So we're looking for a capital.
Mhm.
So it's like there's lots of things that are left out. I think on purpose, ambiguously for fiction because it's easier. Like a whole island is sucked into the ocean. It's been dressed up to the point where people automatically discredit it without looking at it.
Right.
So
It's
and on top of that, I spent not a lot of time, but went to museums a lot as a kid. My mom used to work for one,
Mhm.
so nothing cool, like nothing like it was like all this like ancient stuff. It was like 1800 stuff, but still
Right.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
So it's like you go to Carnegie or you go to like the natural, the DC museums or something, and there's just stuff that's so old, and you're like, how? Like I can barely keep track of GI Joe guns. How did this last millennia?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Jim Largo says, this is a cool change of pace for retroblasting. Nice to see you both. Graham Hancock definitely piqued my interest into antediluvian theory.
yep.
Brian Dillinghamism with the Dillinghamism. Thank you, sir, for being here. And KBA says, you guys look like a pair of pulp serial heroes. Well, that's how I've always wanted to roll out of bed in the morning.
Right.
I can make that a little better. I feel like Sal has shown me up a little bit, so I'll do that.
That's right.
So
We have Michael French, the world explorer, and his ward, Sal.
this blasted turn in this hat makes it hard to tell where it's supposed to fall. There we go. Okay. I'm still off. Whatever. All right. So Embargo, good to see you. He says, hey guys, great to see you again, Sal.
Hello, Embargo.
And Antonio Casado, thank you for the super chat. He says, my archaeology teacher made us watch the opening of Raiders and then asked what was wrong with it. He didn't take any notes. That's a grave robber. Well, Harrison Ford says the same thing. He's not. He's a cinematic adventure hero. He's not a real archaeologist or even a real scholar. Bradshaw Studios just watched the new trailer. Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah.
However you want to take that, Bradshaw, I'll interpret it any way you want. I saw it as well, and wow. Yeah.
He's like, I've seen things, and it's like, he's like, things I can't believe. I'm like, you think you were looking for artifacts that you knew existed and where to look for them? What do you mean you saw things you couldn't believe?
Yeah. And if it, for those of you who haven't seen the trailer yet, or maybe aren't going to see the trailer, but you can't avoid the title. I don't think saying the title is a spoiler. The title of it is The Dial of Destiny, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which, if we're in the ballpark, that means they may have aped the plot from the first Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movie slightly, which is not a good plot to ape. So just pointing that out there.
I was like, when I saw Dial of Destiny, I was like, the rotary dial of destiny? Like, is that what we're doing?
Laserpants says Dial of D's nuts. Oh God, is the new Indiana Jones trailer out? Yes, it is. It's 2 minutes. If you'd like to bounce out and watch it, come back. That's fine. We're not gonna say much about it.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people hate themselves. It's fine.
Okay, so I started reading Fingerprints of the Gods. I have since bought the audio, and I was reading this years ago. So as an example, I had Graham Hancock, for everybody listening, I had Graham Hancock cameoed in RetroBlasting 10 years ago when I did one of the first Star Wars follies. So in the beginning of Don't Eat the Yellow Lightsaber, there is a shot, this one, and there I am reading Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. It's always been an interest of mine, and I don't know how that thing just expanded, but all right. And let me see if I can get it to go away. There we go. All right, cool. I almost forgot how to use StreamYard there for a minute. So
happens to me a lot. Mostly during Iconicon.
Brian Dillingham says the soap of destiny. Yeah, the dial of destiny, the pert of persuasion. When I was reading Graham Hancock's book, I was so happy that, and for those of you that need some context, so I know I'm kind of all over the place, but I promise we're zeroing in on a coherent conversation. For those of you that don't know much about Graham Hancock and some of the alternative archaeology theory that we're talking about, the baseline of it is simply that there are structures on the earth that archaeologists know are much older than the civilizations that inhabited them, and or they are on locations where they have evidence that people inhabited these plots of land long before certain temples were built on them and things like that. The architectural complexity of the masonry is similar between a lot of these sites. And then on top of that, you have questions about how these sites line up to the stars overhead at certain dates, specifically around 10,500 BC, which would predate a lot of traditional archaeological established lore.
Which most of which align with Sirius, which is I didn't know until comparatively recently. I'm in my 30s, but growing up, I'd always been told that the North Star was the brightest star in our sky outside of the sun, obviously. And turns out, no, it's Sirius. Sirius is the brightest star. And I was like, okay, well, that undoes like 20 years of just bedrock knowledge that I thought I had.
Yeah. One of the ones that they talk about a lot that's up for contention is the Sphinx itself, because the water erosion evidence on it and other things that really the traditional Egyptology can't quite refute. Like they don't make an argument for it. They just tell these guys you can't speak on it. Like,
that is weird, and then they just keep moving.
Yeah. We disregard that. Da, and then they keep moving. Yeah. So it leads down a path of, well, Plato talked about Atlantis, and he talked about it in detail, and he was referencing older documents that are no longer in existence, because a lot of people copied things over, like cartographers. They would
they would take a map and write over it.
Yeah, they would fill in gaps with older maps that were of what do they call that, that had good reputation. Even back then, cartographers knew which cartographers in the past were charlatans and which ones were credible. So it's like a whole thing. But that's just to give you guys kind of a centering effect, because a lot of the ancient myths, which, like Troy's an example of a myth that turned out to be real. A lot of these origin myths of these civilizations have commonalities. Now, some people have said, well, there are floods all the time, and so, like, for example, it's not necessarily that because every ancient culture has a flood myth that it's all the same flood. And I'm like, okay, I guess, but certain cultures that do share commonalities in architecture and thought and skill, and they all do seem to share some of these stories. Yeah. And that's kind of what got me going. Now, Melinda, she has a degree in anthropology and archaeology, so she loves to make me feel, silly about this stuff.
Well, she's someone I would consider an authority.
Right. And at the same time, she's like, Michael, she's like, this is what's called idealism. She called it idealism or idealistic archaeology, where it's the idea that everything's connected. It's not conspiracy theory, but it's connecting things that some people say, no, they're not connected. It's coincidence and all this kind of stuff. I'm of the opinion, or the take, that you keep piling up coincidences, and suddenly there's too many coincidences for it to be a coincidence.
Right. They say in my line of work, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern.
Yes. Right. So. Yeah. It leads me back to the numbers, and I wanted to find out real quick from you, Sal, like, did you do a lot of reading on this once you got to a certain place, or did you watch a lot of documentaries, or how did you absorb? Did you do like a lot of internet research, or did you buy books, or what was it?
So it's time to come clean. I don't know how to read. So no, I have a difficult time sitting down and reading something. So I do a lot of like audio stuff.
Right.
So, I had Audible for a while, so I would listen to the Audible files and all that while I'm doing other things. Similar to the way that I do like live streams, I like to listen to them, not necessarily watch them.
Right.
So that was kind of my thing. So I would listen.
Trying to get this camera to focus. Sorry, there you go.
Yep. I was like, I just told you I can't read. But so it was a combination of like podcasts, listening to Audible books, and documentaries, things on the History Channel. If they ever they either talk about World War II or ancient aliens, or like that island in Canada that might have gold buried on it somewhere. But I guess pretty much all they talk about. Or even I'll take fiction if I can. There was Charlie Hunnam did a movie that kind of went under the radar called The Lost City of Zed, which was pretty good. It's pretty good, all things considered. And if nothing else, it actually kind of shows, I think, the turning point, sort of, which was, it was around the time of, what do they call it, the Bone War, when those 2 guys whose names are escaping me were digging up all the dinosaurs, and they misidentified like hundreds of them just so they could have the most. But he being Charlie Hunnam's character, whose name I can't remember, goes to the Amazon and finds like pots, pans, like finds evidence that there's something here, and he brings it back to England and asks for money, I think in front of Parliament or something. He's like, I need money for this expedition because I have evidence. And people start catcalling, going pots and pans, like completely dismissing him. And I'm like, that's probably part of what happened. Why a lot of stuff just doesn't get looked into, because it got shot down, because it's run by guys like authority is mostly held by being the smartest man in the room.
Right.
So if you have all the information, you have all the power. So if someone's like, hey, I may have found this thing that was, according to legend, shouldn't exist, but I may have found it, and they're like, he might know more than me. He'll become more famous, have more power. Denied. But so all that to say, if nothing else is worth watching for that to unfold in the first 20, 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But answering your question, I kind of take it anywhere I can get it.
Okay. I'm trying to find, I'm not ignoring you. I'm trying to find the section that I wanted to read from Hancock's book, but I have a feeling that I might have to grab my third book. I might have forgotten which book it was in. I also have brain problems sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's what happens. You have to data dump all the important things because you got to make Bionic 6 or something.
yes, because Bionic 6 is far more important
Right.
than this to most people.
That's I call it, you can only hold so much information in your immediate recall, like your RAM, I guess. And it's like sometimes you have to push things out to make room for things that aren't important.
Yeah. I think it's going to be in the other book. So let me just grab it, because what I want to illustrate for everybody is that it's not about, when I read this stuff from Graham Hancock and some others, it's not about, because right here, Logic Blaster says, coincidence is a more sensible explanation than conspiracy. Well, nobody here is talking about conspiracies.
No.
Nobody here is talking about a conspiracy theory. We're talking about the natural course of human history and how it may have actually played out. It's not about a conspiracy.
Right.
I don't understand why people apply the conspiracy theory moniker.
Well, it's also worth mentioning that having an interest in this subject doesn't mean that we full on believe it either. Like I feel like Occam's razor plays a big part in most of this. Like the easiest explanation is usually the most accurate one.
Right.
Unfortunately, the other side of that razor, I was going to say other side of the sword, but we'll stick with the razor metaphor. The other side of that is when it comes to exploring or like studying these things, Occam's razor is just like, nope, it's this.
Yeah.
Like no point in looking into it any further. So it's more just an interest. Like we're not saying that the antediluvian society was a real thing or anything like that. Like it's interesting, and we'd like to know more about it. We'd like to see it be fully discredited before we just ignore it completely. Like it'd be foolish to not consider all options. Like it's oh god, I cannot remember the name. But there's a phrase that says that's once one dismisses the rest of all possible worlds, one finds that this is the best of all possible worlds. So it's like when you ignore all other options, and the only option left is one that you're going to go with. So
I've just always looked at the numbers that have been presented, and I've gone, okay, well, if you don't have a solid answer, say with the Great Pyramid, everybody knows it got built. Everybody knows because it's there. Everybody can agree that it is a architectural marvel, the likes of which we cannot replicate. But now there's fundamental disagreement on how it was done. And what's interesting is when people like Hancock try to just simply bring up the numbers of size of the blocks, average weight, versus the time it said that it was built in and how that would have had to have been done, suddenly the establishment wants to say you're trying to discredit the ancient peoples of this society. And he's like, I wasn't saying who built it. I was saying, how did it get built? Like, like
if anything else, we're giving them more credit because it means that there was something else they had that we're not aware of.
Yes. It's I wish I could find the stupid page. I did not have time.
What's funny, and it's one of those, like, I shouldn't say not well-known things, but I think a lot of people seem to forget, like, Cleopatra was a long time ago, and the pyramids were considered ancient when she was around.
Right.
So they've been around for a hot minute.
Yes.
So they've reconstructed what they should have looked like back then, and they had slanted sides. Like it wasn't like black like it is now. Like they had smooth sides cast in white.
Yes.
So it's like the Sphinx used to have paint all over its face. There's lots of different things. Like
Yeah, the hidden entrances, the hidden entrance to the Great Pyramid that wasn't found for millennia, and then an earthquake shook the capstones loose, and a medieval sultan took all the capstones off and used them to build a bunch of buildings in Old Cairo. And then while he was at it, he was like, "Hey, let's see if there's any treasure in there." And of course, they chiseled their way in because they didn't know where the hidden door was, which they found later. And there was nothing in there. Like it's just
Strange, right?
these mysterious chambers, but no
mummies, no nothing.
Yeah.
And that's, I know, like me personally. So I shouldn't say so circling back to an earlier an earlier pin, if you will. So my interest did peak with Atlantis and all that, but I've been interested in archaeology for a long time, and like Tutankhamun was another thing. Brendan Fraser's mummy movies.
Yeah.
And I grew up a large part of my life thinking that Tutankhamun was in the pyramid. Because I'd heard about them in the same year, so I was like, oh, that's where they found him, in the Great Pyramid. And so people think that they found mummies and stuff in the pyramid. There was nothing there, so they were like, oh yeah, these were tombs. It's like they haven't found anything in them, so what were they for?
Yeah, there's nothing in there except tourist graffiti from the early 20th century and 19th century, and very, very, very massive blocks of granite and other stones, very unconventionally placed to create causeways and other interior areas that don't make a lot of sense. When you look at it, you go, there would have been a much easier way to achieve this. Why did they do this way?
And why did they make 3 of them?
Yeah, and then make 3 of them. Right.
So there is not a conspiracy theory, because a conspiracy implies that this is a thing and people are trying to cover it up. But there is a kind of weird woo-woo theory that the Great Pyramids were batteries at one point. And I'm like, that's it. I like how people are able to look at things and then come up with that as their conclusion. So it's like, I like to see the kind of the dots being connected, but it's a little woo-woo to say that's a battery.
Right.
So they're like, oh yeah, because they had a super, gold is superconductive, and they're like, they were capped in gold. And it's like they were, capturing lightning and churning and making electricity, and that's how I'm like, that's kind of.
Is it Plato?
Sure,
there were Greek chroniclers. I can't remember which ones, but they traveled to Egypt and saw the pyramids as they looked originally, and wrote down descriptions of them, and it was. It was mysterious. Like, in other words, they were already old by the time that the Greeks were looking at them. I guess what I've never been able to understand is how, even though the establishment can't pinpoint how these things were built, and again, people, we're not saying who built them, we're saying how they were built. In other words, what was the technology and the knowledge that made it possible? And this goes into the Mayan temples and layouts, and the Central American temples and layouts. All of that stuff is completely similar. You've even got temple complexes in Cambodia that have some of the same alignments to constellations and things like that. And again, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is right here. It's not an insidious plot. It's more of a, hey, maybe we should consider this. But
confusing curiosity for conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so mad at myself. I cannot find. I really wanted to read out this bit about the pyramids, but I can't find the blasted section. So anyway, I guess I'm gonna have to give up on that. That was something I really wanted to do on this live stream, but oh well.
These things happen.
Yeah. Jim Largo, thank you for the super chat. He says, I loved Sid and Marty Krofft's Land of the Lost from the 70s. Any chance there's a lost valley somewhere full of ancient ruins and slee stacks? Doubtful. What's that?
It's the lizard people.
Yeah. There was a Lost Valley in the first Tomb Raider game that had a T-Rex in it, but Lara Croft killed it. So yeah. She had to get those gears. I'm gonna make one more attempt to find this because I really wanted to read this to everybody. But I'm sure people are like, I'm sick of Michael flipping through books.
Well, that's how we get things. That's how we learn things beyond toys.
Yeah. The
So-
reason I wanted to read it was because it's just Hancock doing the numbers. He's not making any conclusions about anything. He's simply presenting the numbers and then saying, when you hear these numbers, what does your brain do? Like,
Right.
how do you reconcile this level of precision temple building or precision mason work? Anyway, unfortunately, my eyes are not finding that section that I used to read off all the time, and it's because I'm in public right now, and
that's how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
So,
and one of the things, so I've seen a lot of backlash for Mr. Hancock recently, where people are like, he does all these things, but doesn't explain why there's no evidence left. And it's like, well, it was 11,000 years ago.
Yeah.
If like, let's say my Mac computer right here was around 11,000 years ago, all that would be left of it would be microplastics in the dirt. Like, that's all that would be left.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's what you have to look for when you go back that far, outside of things like Göbekli Tepe or any monoliths that are left, because that's all that's left. You know, to segue into while you're looking for your numbers, I'll tell my Atlantis thing.
Yes. I am listening.
So, yes. I'd have to look up the channel's name because I don't remember his name. But he has a series of videos about where he thinks Atlantis was, and he talks about like quotes directly from Plato, and even goes about saying like, yeah, like he told it as a story at this thing that was I think translated to like Big Lie or something like that. The whole point was to tell stories. But we're also translated from ancient Greek, so it's like, you know, there are lots of mistranslations throughout the world, but that's okay.
Right.
Because context is everything. It's like if you're reading Latin, context is everything. But Atlantis is described as 3 concentric rings of water, land, water, land. So it was never an island. It's also mentioned that it's part of 10 other kingdoms that comprise Atlantis. So they're talking about like one particular portion of it. But there's a place in the Sahara Desert that's called the Eye of the Sahara, which is in northwestern Africa, I believe. And for whatever reason, we're not allowed to go look at it. We're not allowed to excavate. We're not allowed to like do topographical surveys of it. Like you can only look at it basically from Google Earth. And
why aren't people allowed to go see it?
That's a good question. It's only in recent history that people have been told you can't go look at it anymore. And they found like, yeah, there's 3 concentric rings. It's around the Atlantic where Atlantis would have been. It's not that far away from Greece. And they found doing their surveys, like there's lots of striations in the sand and all that you can only get from massive amounts of water flow. If you look at it from Google Earth, like you can see white all in it, and that's literal salt from salt water. And you can only get those types of massive deposits from salt water. Right. So, and people have asked, you know, what about, you know, how come there's no artifacts or buildings left over? And it's because the rings that you see are the bedrock. So whatever massive flood or anything that happened there, something catastrophic happened there, was enough to strip the land to the bedrock. So it's kind of like, I don't know, that seems like a lot of dots connected there. On top of that, the people, you know, the Atlantis myth started in popular culture, I guess, for lack of a better word, with Plato, because he was kind of the first one to have it written down or whatever. But he got it from his great uncle or something, who got it from the Egyptians. Like he said, he learned it from the Egyptians. So it's kind of weird how the Egyptians, who are on the northeast of Africa would know something that happened on the northwest, unless you consider the fact that around that time when this is supposed to have happened, which doing the math was around 10,500 years ago, 11,000 years ago during the Younger Dryas period, the Nile ran from east to west, or ran the opposite way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, there's enough people around who think that the Egyptians may have come from Atlantis at some point, or at least a portion of the Egyptians may have come from Atlantis.
Right.
So,
it says right here, Michael Connor says, Hancock is merely asking for archaeologists to look. And that's true.
Yeah.
He's simply saying, hey, we need to look into this. He's not saying you guys are definitively wrong. He's saying we need to close the loopholes here. We need to plug the gaps. I did find part of what I wanted to read here. This is about the pyramids, and it relates to what Sal was just talking about the antediluvian Atlantis theory, because where did this architectural knowledge derive from? In other words, if they could do those things then, why can't we do them now? And because we can't recreate the pyramid now, like
not without cranes and everything else.
Cranes, and we would have to build special cranes in order to lift some of these blocks. Like it's insanity. Like I'm not even going to go into the Osirion, and it's massive granite blocks, and it's not an imposing edifice like the pyramids. It's almost sunken in the ground, and yet at the same time, if you actually measure and look at the blocks, it's unfathomable how they would have built that, and it's clearly older than the other things on the site. It says he says let's see where I can start. This is about the Great Pyramid. Courses 1 through 18, which diminished from a height of about 55.5 inches at ground level to just over 23 inches at course 17. Let me start from another place. How long had the pyramid taken to complete? I tried to imagine what it must have been like for them, poised dangerously at this and much higher altitudes, lifting, maneuvering, and positioning exactly an endless production line of chunky limestone monoliths, the smallest of which weighed as much as 2 family cars. How long had the pyramid taken to complete? How many men had worked on it? The consensus among Egyptologists was 2 decades and 100,000 men. It was also generally agreed that the construction project had not been a year-round affair, but had been confined through labor force ability to the annual 3-month agricultural layoff season imposed by the flooding of the Nile. I reminded myself of the implications of all this. It wasn't just the tens of thousands of blocks weighing 15 tons or more that the builders would have had to worry about. Year in, year out, the real crisis would have been caused by the millions of average-sized blocks weighing 2.5 tons that also had to be brought to the working plane. The pyramid has been reliably estimated to consist of a total of 2.3 million blocks, assuming that the masons worked 10 hours a day, 365 days a year. The mathematics indicate they would have needed to place 31 blocks in position every hour, about 1 block every 2 minutes, to complete the pyramid in 20 years. Assuming that construction work had been confined to the annual 3-month layoff, the problems multiplied. 4 blocks a minute would have had to be delivered, about 240 every hour. So imagine the havoc if even a single 2.5-ton block had been dropped from, say, the 175th course, how it would set back work and everything like that. Like, it's a daunting, as he says, it's a daunting degree of coordination that must have been maintained. So how was it done?
Right.
And
that's doing it without trial runs.
Yes.
Right. Like that's just, all right, go.
Yeah.
Like, so people always ask, there's one thing to be said about, the Tolmecs and all of these other cultures that build pyramids, like, oh, they've all built pyramids, which it's a pretty natural thing to build. Like when you're 3 and you're sitting there with your building blocks, you build a pyramid. It's the easiest thing to build. However, you're also, I don't know how tall 3-year-olds are, 2.5 feet, something. I don't know. But you have leverage and you can lift up the block and set it down. So it's a natural thing to want to build. But the why
Yes,
is
the why.
kind of the big thing.
And the why,
So,
and then of course the how, like the how they pulled it off, because it's not just the amount of stone or the weight of it. And when I say this, we're not just going to talk about the pyramids tonight. You need to apply this thinking to the Mayan ruins and the ruins in Cambodia and other places. It's also about like not only the why they did it, but the how they did it. Like how on earth did they pull this off? Action Pop Dad, thank you for the super chat. He says, "Wow, what a duo! Sorry I'm late. We'll watch on 2.5 speed to catch up." And then I just want to make sure that we're caught up on our super chats there. But yeah, it gets down to me. For me, it gets down to there's the purpose of the structure itself. The immense amount of seemingly needless complexity that went into it, not just the weight and size of some of the interior blocks that wouldn't have really needed to be there to achieve the same goal of a hallway or causeway or whatever, but it's also about the mathematical precision of each pyramid as well, because they face the Great Pyramid faces exactly the cardinal directions. Each face is, and every side of it is almost exact to the other side, and it's level. They talk about how the Great Pyramid, by coincidence, occupies the exact center of the largest tectonic plate or whatever, on Earth, and
and at the tip of its cap is like so minusculely off from a start. It's like how it's one of those things where it enters this area where either our ancient ancestors are way more advanced than we want to give them credit for, or they're not. And something else happened, because they're like, well, they want to discredit, an ancient civilization that we've lost over the days, or over the years, I should say. But then they can do things like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, how is one in the realm of possibility and one just completely not?
Well, what I find fascinating about that is there's this criticism, and it's where Graham Hancock got backlash, or his show got backlash recently from some people who were just looking for reasons to get mad. But there's this attitude that when you're asking about the how, you are, I don't know how they make this connection, but you are somehow devaluing the abilities of the people who were there. And I've always said, who's to say that the first Egyptians weren't the last, people of the antediluvian civilization? And the reason I bring that up is because anthropologically, we know of tribal cultures, for example, that invented and forgot the bow and arrow quite a few times. So it's not outside the realm of possibility for there to have been this society that really knew how to build amazing stuff, and the survivors, ended up having a new civilization, which became Egypt. And the next thing you know, they kind of lost that ability, or they decided it wasn't necessary to build these kind of complex structures anymore.
It's like, even on a much smaller scale, the ingredients, or I guess the recipe for Greek fire, was lost for millennia, and then they say like, oh, it's close to napalm. So it's like, it's close to, or it is napalm. So we remembered it, but we don't know for sure. And it's like, so we've forgotten more than we think. And it's just, I've said before, like, you're like, oh, well, how come there's no written record? How come there's no this? It's like, maybe they didn't have to write things down. Like I've said before, like, well, they should have wrote that down. I'm like, okay, you go into the middle of the wilderness and write something down without your pen. Write it down, figure it out. See if you can, I don't know, scratch it onto a rock and see if the rain doesn't wash it away or something. So, it's we weren't there, so we don't know, but
it is odd. It is odd to me. Like you brought up at the very beginning of the stream, Göbekli Tepe. I never can pronounce it, but I know the
I can pronounce it, but I can't spell it. So
the site in Turkey.
With our powers combined.
With power of independent thought. But that site in Turkey is legit. It's not
Mhm.
fake. It's not a Photoshop. It is a legit site in Turkey that they have found within the last
I want to say 20 years. I think it was
20 years.
91 when it was
Yeah.
found. Something.
And it blew all of the dates
Right.
for certain types of established civilizations out of the water.
Yeah,
Like
because the world was still hunter-gatherer at
Right.
that phase. Like they were like, oh, we were just coming out of the ice age. Like we were still hunter-gatherers. There were no civilizations. Like Göbekli Tepe is over 10,000 years old with relief sculpture. It's not just like blocks. It's like there's like relief, which for those who don't know, a relief is really hard to do because it's not like, oh, you have a flat face and you're going to carve in something. You have to carve around something to make a relief. So you have to like start with this much granite and then relief it into like a lizard or whatever you want to make out of it. Yeah. And then the rest of the face is flat.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to make.
Nobody, including Graham Hancock, has said that Göbekli Tepe has been built by anybody but the indigenous people that would have been there. So like it's what I find fascinating about, somebody was asking, Jim Largo just asked, he said, any thoughts on why Egyptologists and other mainstream archaeologists are so resistant to new theories and research? But that's what I find interesting, is the incongruity, because when you're looking at the site in Turkey, nobody in the mainstream archaeological world has debated its age. It's only this kind of like demarcation line into establishment Egyptology that suddenly these things aren't allowed, and they're not allowed to be talked about, and they're not allowed to be, explored. And you want to look at somebody like, Zahi Hawass and say, why do you always assume that finding out exactly how old something was and how it was built is going to take anything away from the Egyptian people? Like it might actually make them even more amazing than they already were. Like why is it always assumed that to look for more facts is going to automatically default to discrediting a group? I that's where I can't get. I don't get it.
It's they're afraid of not being top dog anymore, that something will challenge their authorities on things, I guess. But it's just
is it like a corporate thing where they don't want to be the person that missed it?
Right. I think it's they don't want to be the one without the chair when the music stops. Like it's this bizarre mentality. I don't know. Like we had a brief discussion last night, and without going too far into that rabbit hole and driving people away or getting driven away by torches and pitchforks.
Right.
I think a lot of these people hold their spiritual beliefs near and dear, and a lot of these things call some of those things into question.
Yeah.
While at the same time, like we discussed that pretty much every culture in the world has a great flood myth, and they're not connected. Like there's no way that they could be unless. So it's like it's in this weird kind of gray area where it's like either this happened or something. Like, so it's either these two cultures are not connected at all, even though they share similar beliefs and similar architecture, or we have to admit that they are connected because of that, and that's how they share a flood myth.
Right. Which I've always wondered, why is it bad that two cultures were connected at one time? Why is that a problem? Like
it's because they'd have to rewrite history books, and things like that would prove certain aspects of certain spiritual beliefs and disprove others. Because it wouldn't be able to reinforce everything. Right. And so people wouldn't be able to, they can't cherry pick it. They can't say, okay, this much is true. This part isn't. Right. So it's easier for them to just go, none of this stuff is true. Just ignore everything that all these other people are saying.
Jim KBA says too many experts are afraid of saying they might not have all the answers will devalue their position as an expert. It's a good point. I mean, there's some politics. I mean, I don't mean the kind of politics that are dividing people now. I'm talking about in the traditional sense. There are interpersonal politics involved in this kind of stuff in the academic world.
They're too afraid of being run out,
There is something about, we started this stream by talking about, we mentioned Atlantis because that was your way in.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I, quickly started to understand, because after I read The Sign and the Seal, I read Fingerprints of the Gods. And Fingerprints of the Gods really talks about that antediluvian
Mm-hmm.
aspect. But there's a commonality between this and the Atlantis thing, which is both the Ark of the Covenant and the Atlantis. I don't want to call it a myth, but I don't want to call it a theory either. The Atlantis factor, whatever. The thing they have in common is that they are both very intricately described beyond simply being some vague thing. Like, in other words, there's what I love about this biblical study, because of Indiana Jones, I became fascinated by biblical archaeology for a long time, and I quickly understood that there are far more credible elements of biblical archaeology to pursue than others. So, for example, if we look at Indiana Jones's adventures as a baseline, the Ark of the Covenant is far more of a credible area of study as far as the Torah is concerned than the Holy Grail is, because we know where that actually started, which was with the King Arthur myth, and they trace some of it back to some apocrypha in the book of Nicodemus, but it wasn't a Holy Grail in that book. It was just a passing mention of the cup. It wasn't anything,
which has its ties back to the Crusades, where they would sell holy relics and all that. So
So in the Bible, the Ark of the Covenant is very intricately described, whereas the cup is just the cup. He took the cup and he drank from it, and that was it. They embellished all of that later in medieval times to make it a thing where it was not a thing before. But so a lot of things in the Bible, aside from, as the two best examples, are the two arks. So Noah's Ark and the Ark of the Covenant are intricately described, measurements, dimensions, everything else. Similarly, Plato describes Atlantis in detail, like location and this and that and what it looked like and its layout and all that kind of stuff. So I know I sound like I'm rambling, but what I mean is that there are areas of alternative archaeology where I can get behind the want to go like, yeah, I agree with you. The Holy Grail thing is not as
a bridge too far.
It's a bridge too far. But when you're talking about something like the Ark of the Covenant, and you see how much information was about it before it just disappeared from the Bible, and then we see how detailed the information was about Troy, and then suddenly we found it right where they said it would be. It starts to for me, it what am I trying to say? It galvanizes the things that I kind of feel like are worth looking into. It makes me go, okay, regardless of people saying to me that, oh, this is ridiculous, I go, well, maybe if you read this book or you look into the Bible a little bit and you see as a document, you look at the Bible as a document and you see how much real estate was devoted to describing that damn thing and then following and chronicling it. And similarly, how much was talked about in ancient times about the Atlantis factor, you might look at it differently. But maybe I'm just sounding like a lunatic. I don't know.
No, it's the last wonder of the world is the human mind, I guess. And I feel it's too easily dismissed by people because they just, I don't know, maybe they don't care, or they're too preoccupied, or like Graham Hancock says it, people are too afraid to put their careers on the line. And it's like, if people would, then we might be able to answer some of these questions. Because the Göbekli Tepe is not the only like Younger Dryas thing left over. There's more than a few. So for people who haven't seen it, I think it's called Ancient Apocalypse. is on Netflix. It's like
Yeah.
8 episodes, something like
Mhm.
that. It's worth watching. It's
Mhm.
100% worth watching. And again, he's not an archaeologist. He's not a historian. He's a journalist. So
Mhm.
he's not trying to provide answers. He's providing the questions and waiting for the people who are supposed to be in the know to step up and answer
Mhm.
them.
Right.
But it's easier to dismiss him as a crackpot. But there's a place in the Maldives that has another structure that's about that same age, and that's back when there was a little land bridge before the ocean water rose,
Mhm.
which uh, people have heard me say younger Dryas a few times. For those who don't know, I hope I'm saying this right. I'm having to go through the filing cabinets up here. Dryas is a type of flower. I
Uh-huh.
believe it only grows in extreme cold, like
Mhm.
Arctic temperatures. Like it's a little teeny tiny white flower.
Right.
And I mentioned sediment earlier. Sediment layers from
Mhm.
dirt and all that. And going back about 10,500 or 11,000 years, the sediment layer in Europe has Dryas flowers. So, where the sediment layer in most areas of the world have Dryas flowers, and again,
Right.
they only grow in extreme cold.
Mhm.
So it's like that's kind of weird how we can find, Dryas flowers at the sediment level, and we can also find architecture, but that wasn't the Ice Age. The Ice Age was
Right.
before that.
Right.
So it just means that the Earth's climate plummeted by like 10 degrees globally, pretty much overnight.
Yeah.
So, but there's all sorts of like they're playing God of War, because I'm a man of
Mhm.
culture. Um, the new game is Ragnarok, because
Uh-huh.
that's why not? There's a firm belief that Ragnarok, the mythos or the end of the world, where it says that the Earth will be covered in darkness for
Mhm.
however many years until I can't remember the two humans' names that repopulate the Earth, but they say it may have been based on the Younger Dryas event. So, because they're like the Earth was covered in like basically soot, ash, or darkness for
Mhm.
however long, and they're like, was it a volcano? Was it multiple volcanoes? Now there's the Younger Dryas multi impact theory or
Mhm.
something, where some asteroid had broken up into meteorites
Right.
and scattered across the Earth, and there was all the impact kicking everything up, and
Right.
so it's a whole thing that we just don't have enough information on, and people aren't willing to look at it. So
Mhm. I
yeah,
wanted to Oh, sorry, go ahead. Please
it
continue.
yeah it just ties more into the fact that the human species like has been around for 300,000 years, and it's
Mhm.
taken us this long to get to where we're at when we only started civilization 10,000 years ago.
Right.
And it's like the that's thin, Riggs.
Yeah. It's anorexic.
Yeah,
Uh
the maths just don't add up on that one.
no, they don't. I want to give credit to Midnight's Edge Andre. He did a video this past week on some of the dust up around the Graham Hancock show on Netflix that you just mentioned.
Hmm.
And he's a Graham Hancock reader as well.
Hmm.
And one of the things that he made me aware of, and then I went and watched, was he made me aware of this YouTube channel called World of Antiquity. And why he brought it up was World of Antiquity is a YouTube channel that is hosted by a establishment archaeologist who is willing to discuss Graham Hancock while at the same time pushing back in areas where, because Graham Hancock is not
Right.
an archaeologist, he is a journalist. Uh, he's willing. So I watched a video he did, and he's not mean spirited about it at all. He's
Hmm.
not, he's not like Zahi Hawass. He's
Right.
very measured. And he was talking about the flood myth stuff and how
Hmm.
it related to Hancock's writing and things like that. And he even though he refutes certain things or corrects certain things that Hancock said, I felt when I was watching it, it was a great way to balance everything out. And I almost felt like this is what Hancock has been asking for in a
Hmm.
good, he's literally been asking for it. He's been like, please, let's look at this. Let's look at it together. Let's talk
Hmm.
about this. Tell me where I'm wrong and look at where I've got question marks where you haven't filled in the gaps.
Hmm.
Um, I would highly recommend for anybody watching this tonight who maybe is skeptical of Graham Hancock or even likes Graham Hancock like I do, you will like the YouTube channel World of Antiquity to give you that other side of things, that while it's not shutting Graham Hancock out, it's professionally confronting Graham Hancock's work.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because we were talking about their stuff.
It's good to not be in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really easy to get caught up in your own thoughts and everything else, and just without your own confirmation bias, without anyone challenging you on anything.
Yeah.
So,
Andrew Sabina, thank you for the super chat. He says, "Evening all. I once listened to an audio version of Dead Men's Secrets by Jonathan Gray that went into this kind of stuff. I was pretty mind blown. Really enjoying this stream." You're welcome. Thanks for being here. And then somebody just said here, where was it? Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia, I bet. Well, that was Graham Hancock was the guy that championed that theory. He was the one that brought that to light. So yeah, exactly. We have another super chat here from Skyfall. Thank you so much. Have you guys looked into the Olmecs? Good show. Well, the Olmecs are in the thumbnail. So Hancock looks into the Olmecs in Fingerprints of the Gods, and in it he talks about how the oil industry destroyed all of this amazing evidence in the 50s that could have been really helpful in determining who the Olmecs were, how they got established, how they were able to build these amazing sculptural and architectural marvels. But unfortunately, a lot of the Olmec evidence was wiped out in our time, meaning our contemporary time within the last century and a half, which is a real shame. But yeah.
It still happens today, even in the Middle East. It's like there for a while, it seemed like a good 10, 15-year stretch. It was like, another ancient site was blown up by someone with a grudge. I don't know if that's one of the no words on YouTube or not. So extrapolate.
Yeah. Jason here says, I think the educated directors in the established field just need a bigger picture view. They are so pipelined. That's why I would highly recommend you try out World of Antiquity as well and see if I found it a palatable way to distill the establishment's point of view without them, raking. And I said, I use that word a lot, and then I'm afraid people will mishear me. I said raking, Raking, raking Graham Hancock over the coals. But yeah, it's something that I feel like in some ways is coming to a head, because what did you think when Graham Hancock got the show on Netflix? Because up until this point, he's done a few specials.
Right.
The people that are willing to interview him, and he's not a crackpot. He's a very well-mannered, soft-spoken guy, very well-educated.
He's very level-headed.
Level-headed. Like he's not an aliens dude. And the only people, though, who for a long time would give him the time of day, and I'm not trying to take anything away from any of these people at all, but I'm trying to give a perspective. Joe Rogan would interview him, and that's to Joe Rogan's credit. But at the same time, a lot of people would say, well, oh, you got on Joe Rogan. Well, that, and it's like, well, when nobody else will talk to me.
Yeah.
It's
I was pleasantly surprised that it was on Netflix. I didn't even know, like, it was just weird because we'd been discussing doing this live stream back in Iconicon, and it was a few weeks ago, like maybe a month ago at this point, something like that, where we were like, oh, we need to do that. Like we kind of fell off, forgot about it a little bit. And I just happened to get on Netflix like a few days later, and there it was. I was like, we were just talking about Graham Hancock, not even, so it was like, I don't know. It was a pleasant surprise, and I was kind of happy that, someone like Netflix, I'd expect, like, I don't know, maybe Tubi or someone to put that up, and just because they'd get buried. But Netflix was like, nope, here it is, and it was on their like recommended like thing. So I was kind of, this is also the same company that did Tiger King, so it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
Right.
But I was pleasantly surprised. I was happy that he was given a platform, But
clearly he's made some waves with it too.
yeah,
So
which is good.
yeah.
Put those people on the back foot.
Mm-hmm. Master Sun 42 says, "Did you say Olmec is in Sunman? Way to bring it back to toys." Well, that's what the Sunman company was named after. Were the Olmec toys. Excuse me. And I want to address something that K-Dog Broadcasting said. He said there isn't a huge amount of franchises of archaeology out there beyond a few notable ones. I'm so glad you brought this up, K-Dog, because this was part of the discussion that I wanted to have tonight. Sal and I talked about it a little bit in planning this. No problem, Keith Knight. It's late where you are. You need your rest. Adventure franchises based around, and I know we've just joked earlier about grave robbers, but it's adventure, it's fictional adventure archaeology is basically the genre. There's the adventure genre, but within that there is the archaeological adventure genre, which King Solomon's Mines is one of the grandfathers of that. And like the Ark of the Covenant and Atlantis, King Solomon's Mines has at least a historical connection to something real. Like they haven't found it. They don't even really know, as far as the mines go, what the mines reference is that Solomon was known for having immense wealth. Nobody knows exactly where that wealth came from or how he acquired it, but there are theories.
I believe that was actually figured out. It was I don't know, something about a bunch of diamonds and monkeys, I think. I think it was somewhere in the Congo, I believe.
Yeah, I watched a DuckTales special, I think, that explained it a little better.
That's right.
No, but I was talking to Sal about this before we did the show. What makes an archaeological adventure franchise, or even episode of that franchise, more credible than the next? So I wanted to just bring up a few examples. One of the big ones that came out within the last 20 years, I wasn't a huge fan because I thought that it was kind of a sleight of hand, was the Da Vinci Code, where a lot of things that are real world were brought into a kind of, salad, and then they were, spun around, and everybody was like, ooh, there must be a connection here. But as you isolated each one, you started to realize that the whole story fell apart, which leads to my belief that an archaeological adventure story that's going to succeed needs to keep it simple, stupid. Like, it needs to focus on something where you can dig into that one thing. So Ark of the Covenant's a great example. Atlantis is a great example. It has to be historically tied. You want the audience, and this is just me, and I want to hear your thoughts, Sal, but you want the audience, as far as I'm concerned, because the ones I've seen that are successful, you want the audience to walk out thinking about the possibilities, because they know that it's tied to their real world and our collective human history. So to that end, that's why the Da Vinci Code was successful in that regard, even though I don't hold it in high esteem, because it took far too many liberties and created a conspiracy theory, which is not what good archaeological adventure does.
It went too far into like Illuminati kind of territory, where it's like, okay, like that's a whole other topic of conversation, where it's like, is that a real thing? Is that all conspiracies that were kind of like taking a conspiracy cake and then putting more on top of it? So
like it was nice. It was nice in the premise statement of the first national treasure that they were looking for the Templar treasure, but then they kept complicating it because it was around the time of the Da Vinci Code, and so they wanted to make it this whole Da Vinci Code thing. And it was like, look, beyond in Raiders of the Lost Ark, he had to solve one question: how big does the staff need to be? Like, how tall does the staff need to be? But when it's like, oh, I've got to look for codes in old books and under desks and on bells in Pennsylvania, and then I got to like know how to play the bones or whatever and do the thing, it starts to collapse on itself, I feel. But again, maybe that's just maybe there are people out there that like a more complex
Mhm.
archaeological adventure than me. I'm not that guy.
I like simplicity because it's the wonder. Like
Mhm,
it's not like I'm not above a complicated story or using my brain or anything, but it's kind of like it, when people say pseudo archaeology for what we're talking about. I'm like I call that pseudo intellectual, where
yeah,
it's like you're making a puzzle that you know the answer to already. It's like
right.
I have the answer. And the answer is 78. Now I'm just going to go backwards and make a complicated math problem to get to that answer. So it's
Mhm,
like it kind of takes the I don't know I shouldn't say the mystery out of it, but it's like something like Atlantis or the Ark or something.
mhm,
It's something that's so ingrained in almost our DNA. Almost it's
mhm,
a primordial thing to explore what's not been explored yet. It's that sense of, I guess, greater wanderlust in all of
mhm,
us that just want to find the unfindable. And it, when it comes to things like Indiana Jones or all that, it's like you said, how tall does the staff need to be? Because he knew, like in his gut, he's like, all this is real.
right.
So where Da Vinci Code, it's like, yeah, I got to solve these cylinder things, and if I get it wrong, it's going to dissolve the paper. And it's like,
Yeah,
so someone would, it's like setting up a board game of Mousetrap, and then just triggering like one of them halfway through.
right. Yeah,
Like, who would do that? Like, first of all, who would hide a treasure or something like that and want people to find it, but then make it so hard that clues
mhm,
could be destroyed and then never be found?
yeah,
It's that when it comes to things like treasure maps and Blackbeard's treasure or things like that. Like, yeah, okay, it's a fun story because characters make the story. The stories don't make the characters.
yeah,
But it's like if you want it to be found so badly, why would you hide it?
yes, right.
So, which that was something else about Göbekli Tepe, which is super bizarre that I didn't mention, is the fact that all of this was because it's not just one like small little building; it's a site that has like
Mhm,
4 or 5 that they've excavated, and through ground penetrating radar or sonar,
mhm.
I forget which one, they found there's other ones circling it,
Oh,
and they were all intentionally buried.
uh-huh.
So it's like they were built and then buried, which is weird. Like
Yeah,
why would someone, especially in when the rest of the world is hunter gatherer, why would they do that?
yeah.
But I digress from that.
No, no,
But
no. It's all
it's just
valid.
yeah the I think that's where it works for action adventure that are like Indiana Jones and uh, I don't know, the librarian, things like that. It's the sense of wonderment and a destination.
Right.
It's a journey where it's like Da Vinci Code, National Treasure. Um, I don't know. Trying to think of any other ones. It's just kind of like
Well, they're connected to one thing that Hollywood's obsessed with, which is the Illuminati. And he
yeah,
says the Evil Fandango says Illuminati was a real organization. George Washington wrote about them, and that very well may be true. The
or someone claiming to be George Washington.
what I'm getting at with that Evil Fandango is it may very well have been an organization or people thought it was, but there's not enough information about it that you can hang a story that the audience can then go, oh wow, and walk out with a sense of wonder.
Right.
What I mean by that is you look at Da Vinci Code, which I think they mention Illuminati. They're more
Knights Templar.
Knights Templar and that Catholic group, Deus or something Day, what the
Yeah,
albino dude was.
like Dave's ex taco truck or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. Um, but I think Illuminati and the Freemasons and all that stuff kind of goes into that. You got National Treasure, which does that, and then you've
Mhm.
got the first Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movie, which tries to do the whole Illuminati thing. All of them have a different take on it, like a
Mhm.
wildly different take. And you sit back and you go, well, when all these takes are so wildly different about this thing that's supposed to
Mhm.
be a real thing, then it all starts to feel really made up.
Right.
And so then for me, my brain can't get engaged. It's like there's this really schlocky um adventure archaeology movie from back in the early 80s called Bloodstone.
Mhm.
Bloodstone is totally made up. Like it's just this made up gem. Like it's just
Mhm.
there's no magic to it. It's just a gem, but it's this legendary lost gem, whatever.
Mhm.
Because it's made up, because there's nothing to walk away from it and chew on and go, wow, the world is really
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
You just kind of go, whatever.
Yeah.
I can't get invested in this in the watch, you know?
Right. It's when we were discussing this a few days ago, I made a parallel to horror movies, and how for me the mark of a good horror movie is when I walk out of it going, I want to learn more about that monster or
Mhm.
whatever it was. Where there was like I don't know, Pazuzu from The Exorcist or something. I want to learn
Right.
more about
Yeah.
whatever that was. Because it's like if I walk into something like I don't know, the movie Sinister. I haven't seen that since
Mhm.
it came out, but it's like, oh, it's some made up thing. Like I don't care because there's no like instinctual horror to it. Like
Yeah.
you watch something like The Witch or something, and it has just it's instinctual. Like there's something about it that just makes you
Mhm.
uneasy the whole time you're watching it, and it's ingrained in our DNA from like the campfires from cavemen. Like don't go out into these things. These things will
Yeah.
come to get you, cautionary tales and all that. So when I see a good horror movie that has something from a religion or a Wendigo or something from our folklore that's
Mhm.
ingrained in us, it makes it better for me. Like
Mhm.
I'm already, I see something that looks unnatural, but I recognize it, and it's like like it triggers that that whole kind of without too far of a segue. And
Mhm.
it's gonna be gross. It's a gross segue. Apparently, I don't know. I don't remember where I heard this, but supposedly, if you feel uneasy looking at
Mhm.
mannequins and things like that, that means someone in your lineage way, way back decided to get freaky with a dead body.
Really?
Yeah, supposedly that's a thing. I don't know how they verify that or how that conclusion was jumped to, but I
Ex-
bring that up. Yeah, I bring that up as an example for like when you see something like a Wendigo, it's like and then something goes kink in the back of your brain. It means like something primordial in the back of your back of your lizard brain.
Uh-huh.
It, the connection being something like Atlantis is a shared myth or a shared story that like we have as a planet. Like I'm
Right.
sure if you talk to someone, I don't know, from I don't know Guatemala, something just random country, I don't know about the Illuminati, like that seems like almost a purely American thing.
Yeah.
They probably heard of Atlantis,
It's kind of like how there are people who believe that the Freemasons were tied to the Templars.
right?
There's no real evidence of a connection there. It's more I used to make people who really, dug the whole Freemasons thing. I used to make them really mad because I'd be like, Freemasons are just trying to get a reputation boost by glomming on to the Templar thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great example um of one of those, as National Treasure dealt with it, which was the Templar treasure, but specifically if you actually look at where that archaeological mystery comes from, it's from a set of facts that we know to be true
Mm-hmm.
about the raid on the Templar priory in France, the HQ,
Mm-hmm.
on Friday the 13th of
Right.
1307, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we know that the port at La Rochelle, where the
Mm-hmm.
Templar ships were docked, a caravan of wagons got out of the headquarters because they were tipped off early
Mm-hmm.
before King Philip's men arrived,
Mm-hmm.
and they tried to chase them because they knew they were headed to La Rochelle. And when they got to La Rochelle, the Templar boats were gone, and they
Right.
know for a fact that they did not account for 12 Templars. So
A knight's
we
procession, if you will.
say what?
A knight's procession, if you will.
Hey, that's a great point. So I hadn't thought of that. Oh, I should have brought that up in the video. Damn it. Oh, but anyway, that kind of level of detail that is confirmed
Mm-hmm.
is the kind of thing that makes for a really good
Right.
archaeological adventure premise.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
The best stories are like 80% true, 20% fiction.
Yes.
It's enough for you to chew on and like Okay, like I know this much,
Mm-hmm.
and that you can make that leap for the extra 20%.
Right.
But when you have something wholly fabricated, like some made up culture
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know existed somewhere, and they had this I don't know candelabra made out of baby skulls and pewter or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well,
And like,
one a great example of that aligns with your acute area of interest. And Keith Knight, thank you for the super chat. He says, "Great to see you guys. I got here finally." Bah, Sal, cool new mask you're wearing, brother. Love you, dudes. Love you too, Keith. The most critically acclaimed Tomb Raider game is the original.
mm-hmm,
The original is all about Atlantis.
mm-hmm,
And it is a really, really good story. Like I remember when I played it in 96 and then played it again in its anniversary version, which was just as compelling and fun. It felt like the video game equivalent of Raiders of the Lost Ark because there was just enough that we all know in our collective history about Atlantis to really be plugged into it.
mm-hmm.
Conversely, when I played Tomb Raider 2, the next year, it was a fun game,
Mm-hmm.
but it was all about the dagger of Shan, which is a made up thing. And like when you stab yourself with the dagger, you become a big golden dragon. And I'm kind of like, that's okay. The game is fun to play
Mm-hmm.
in the doing,
Right.
but I don't walk away thinking about something
Mm-hmm.
greater than the sum of the game's parts. You know what I mean? Like the story. Whereas the second Indiana Jones movie is based on a real Indian legend about the Sivalinga. So even though we as American Western folk might not have been as familiar with it at first, when you go digging into it, it's like, oh no, wait, this is actually based on something. Like now, is it based on it to the degree that the Ark of the Covenant is, or an Atlantis story, or is it based on it to the degree that a Holy Grail story or a National Treasure story is? That's up in the air. I haven't really dug into it that much, but nonetheless,
yeah, it's they kind of lost the plot, so to speak, as those movies go on. Like characters make great stories, right? The character makes a story, not the other way around.
Yeah,
but it kind of gets further and further away from what Indiana Jones was.
Right.
So, I mean, we went from Ark to which I get technically Temple of Doom is a prequel, technically, to Grail. And like, okay, that's further away, and then Aliens.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh boy, where are we going now?
I can't even remember the plot of National Treasure 2.
I know I've seen it.
I did too.
That's the extent of my knowledge on it.
And
4 or 5 of them now, or something crazy.
Oh, have they done others that are like straight to video or something? Because I know the first 2 were theatrical.
I think there was a reboot even.
Oh wow.
So
King Eric, this is the bulk of the Knights Templar were killed off by King Philip, but there were still outposts and other areas where they got the message and ran for it ahead of time, and 12 of them escaped the headquarters in Paris with what we still don't know was in those wagons. And we do know that King Philip and his men, who really they rounded them all up and slaughtered them for their money. They found no money. They found no treasure hoard. They found nothing. So they seized their lands and their buildings and stuff, but they did not find any wealth, which the Templars had a crap ton of, because they were the first international bankers in Europe. They created the credit card system essentially. But that's where the mystery lies is, the organization was wiped out by King Philip, and the lion's share of Templar Knights were wiped out. But there were survivors, and they went to ground. And that's why the Freemasons keep getting away with saying, oh, we're Templar. And I'm like, really? Like, yeah.
Kind of aping some of their stuff. And I don't know. We go from knights to building things. Okay.
Yeah, that big hole in that island in Canada, Nova
Right.
Scotia. Yeah. Indy's never gone back in time.
Not yet.
Not yet, but what's the phrase? Don't it's not over till the fat lady sings. So well, we are at the 90-minute mark. We're just over the 90-minute mark. Is there anything that we haven't touched on tonight, Sal? I mean, obviously we will do this again or something related to it. But is there anything tonight that you wanted to touch on that we haven't brought up?
I mean, there's a lot of things that I would like to touch on, but those things I need to go kind of blow the dust off the cover and kind of before I bring them up, because I could be like, oh, thing. That's all I remember. So
thank you, Drew. Well, then we were already planning, guys, on doing a follow-up to this, and so we will. So we'll build some. This was kind of a primer. We'll probably dig in to various subjects on the next one. So and if you guys are really mean to us, we'll dig in on a subject like Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold, which is a terrible film, and we will make you suffer, all of you. So yeah,
that's right. If you push us too hard, we'll have to make a movie based on one of Michael's ideas, which is hysterical.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I just remember what you're referring to. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. All right. Scott Hughes says, "Can this be a series like War Stories?" I don't see why not. I don't want to impose on Sal's time, but if Sal was willing to do it, I would. Yeah.
Give the people what they want.
Keith Knight, thank you for the super chat. He says, "Sal, are we going to see any more of The Way We Played?" I love that series.
Possibly. I do have a distinguished guest whom I'm speaking with about continuing, but it'll be a few weeks' time. Other than that, it's this is, shouldn't say a return to YouTube. I'm on a sabbatical, but things like this I'll come out of hiding for. I gave you all my tour and you didn't watch it, you bastards. So
I'm keeping Sal alive as far as like on YouTube alive by making him understand that anything he actually wants to talk about, he can come talk about it with me here, and we'll do the show together.
For anyone in the chat or anyone who catches us on the replay and you're actually listening, let us know if you want us to talk about video games, because that came up at one point. So
yeah. We have a lot to say about video games. As a matter of fact, this is a great segue with K-Dog's comment. He says, outside of Harrison Ford, who is the best treasure hunt hero? I want to give a side note to Brendan Fraser and The Mummy, as much as I hate that movie. All right, so I'm going to give my quick rundown, and then Sal, give your quick rundown. As far as treasure heroes go, or treasure hunt heroes, I'm going to go right out there and say that I'm not trying to throw any shade on Nathan Drake as a character, but I am going to say that the Uncharted series doesn't have anything compellingly archaeological to talk about. All their archaeological stuff is just gold and treasure and pirate booty, and it doesn't have any bearing on greater questions about humanity. So I've dubbed the Uncharted series Goonies for assholes, which I think is what it is. As far as my opinion on who's the other best treasure hunt hero, my vote would be for this lady, Lara Croft. I think Lara Croft is the other worthy archaeological hero in the modern times. I love Alan Quatermain, but he only was in King Solomon's mines before the other books that Haggard put him in were very esoteric, and they weren't really archaeological adventures. Also, shout out to the video game character George Stobart from the Circle of, the first game's called Circle of Blood, but the series is called Broken Sword. The Broken Sword video game series is a great Indiana Jones / archaeological adventure series. Highly recommended. What about you, Sal?
Well, I would like to say that Harrison Ford had the treasure hunt hero, but Brendan Fraser was the Harrison Ford of my generation, much like Chris Pratt is the Harrison Ford of this generation. So hopefully he doesn't get the same treatment that Brendan Fraser did. He's a phenomenal person, like a great person, not just a great actor. He's a great person, and I'm glad to see that he's making a comeback.
Yeah.
He deserves it. I loved the Mummy movies, as bad as they were. I'll never forget that they had that really awful CGI Scorpion King in the second one, and they made him do the people's eyebrow. So it's like, okay, but whatever. It's I don't know, the greatest treasure hunter. I do agree with you that Uncharted, while fun in gameplay, I only liked the second one in terms of story because everything was like, oh, like they went to, I think it was Shangri-La in that one. And I was actually dating a girl from Nepal at that point.
Oh,
so I was like, right, it had a lot of connections. Like, so
yeah,
that's I probably have a bias on that because of when I played it now. But there was always a little twist at the end of all of them. So it's like, I think the third one, it's like, oh, it's jinns and they're hallucinations because we drank this water that's been stagnant for 1,000 years. I'm like, oh, gee, you think?
Yeah.
Lucky you don't have like jaundice right now or something. But I don't know. And then the fourth one was just, people say the fourth one was the best one. I'm like, he had like, oh, it's my brother that I've never mentioned before. Now he's the main character in this game. All right. But I think it's the ending of the fourth one everyone likes. It's a nice cap. Like they could have just put that on the end of the third one. But I don't know. I had a DuckTales video game for Game Boy. That was pretty good.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. And let's not forget, and this isn't really a joke, although people might laugh, the cartoon Mask was pretty much a team of Indiana Joneses always trying to stop Miles Mayhem and his goons from getting equivalent things like the Ark of the Covenant. Now, obviously, it was a cartoon, so they made up a lot of stuff, but they also had some episodes where it wasn't made up. It was just really embellished or fictionalized in some way. So yeah, Mask is a shadow Indiana Jones adjacent property. Yeah.
I do have one question to posit to the chat, and they can answer whenever they want to. At what point does it stop being grave robbing and become archaeology?
Yeah.
What's the cutoff?
I'm
sure there's like an ethical cutoff and then a legal cutoff, but I'd like to know how such an arbitrary number was arrived upon. So they're like, oh, like I think I was told it was like when there's no living ancestors left or no discernible living ancestors left. I'm like, well, I guess they're never gonna get Genghis Khan's grave opened up.
Master Son says the best archaeologist is James Bond. He can discover trouble and attractive women no matter where he is. Please don't block me. I think what you're not seeing, Master Son, is that as a serialized character, James Bond is an action adventure character. Therefore, he gets into situation, but I don't know if he's an archaeologist.
He does do a lot of cave exploring.
That's true. I stand corrected.
Yeah.
He
highbrow humor over here.
he definitely gets his digs in on the communists.
True.
Oh,
speaking of commies, for some reason that reminded me, Johnny Quest.
Oh yeah. Oh, great point.
Yeah.
Johnny
Quest, top-notch stuff. Even today, Hanna-Barbera. Can't beat. I was watching that on YouTube not even a week ago because I was like, man, I haven't seen that in forever. Something that could use a revival in a big way.
Yeah, and the whole original series is now on Blu-ray. They went back to the negatives and put it. I haven't bought it yet, but I think it came out last year on Blu-ray. Did you ever watch the New Adventures?
Sort of. I was aware of it. I had some of the toys, but I only caught maybe one or two episodes. My dad was a huge Johnny Quest fan when he was a kid. And so we sat down to watch it a couple times and he just was not interested.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay, the reason I asked is because I remember catching a few episodes of that, and I remember it being kind of brutal in places. Like I remember a guy like getting kicked into a pit full of vipers and dying on that show. I was like, wow.
Ragnar Lothbrok.
Yeah.
There was a brief reboot, Johnny Quest. Beyond that, I think they called it Venture Brothers.
I remember Venture Brothers. I remember knowing of it. I never saw it.
It's very tongue in cheek, but there's like obvious references. Like they knew what they were doing, but it's so funny.
Right.
So funny.
Matt Movies, good to see you, man. Just because you both are great. Well, we miss hanging out with you.
I do. You know, it's funny that he's here. I just wanted to say, Matt, that I really loved your work in Almost Famous.
Oh man. Well, we will be back with another show at some point. I know some people have asked. There was somebody up here who asked. I was going to highlight it, and I totally forgot. They were asking if we could talk about. Let me see if I can find it. I've lost it. It's been a very active chat tonight. So there was somebody. Oh, here it is. Drake Tank says, I would like you guys to talk about mythology stories.
Absolutely. I'm all about Egyptian, Norse, Greek, all those mythologies. They kind of lose me when we get to like South American stuff because it's hard for me to pronounce a lot of that stuff.
Right.
It's still interesting, but it took me up until about a year ago to be able to pronounce Quetzalcoatl.
Yep.
So, because unless I hear it said out loud, I'm like, so.
The last two super chats here. Sorry, I was looking for something to answer one of these super chats. So Master Son 42 says, remember Relic Hunter with Tia Carrera? She was an archaeological type person. Yeah, I believe her name was Sydney Fox, as a matter of fact, in that show. It was a total ripoff of Tomb Raider. It had its charm, but it was during that Xena kind of era, Xena / Sheena with that girl from Baywatch and a number of those other schlocky shows. Or Highlander, the series. Don't shoot me, everybody, but that show was on in that same era. Briscoe County Jr., all those. The funny part about that is I found out the other day that show, all 3 seasons came to DVD, but the 3rd season is apparently super, super rare on DVD and commands stupid prices for what you get in that show. Like, you're not even getting something as good as Xena, and people are paying out the nose for that show. Season 3, season 1 and 2, you can get all day. Season 3, good luck, my friend.
What was it? New Adventures of He-Man? Same thing.
Same thing. Yeah.
Those two seasons were out of print, and for whatever reason, that season 2 is like $240.
Yeah.
Even though everyone hates the show.
Yep.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. KBA says, I still want to know how Cobra found the tomb of Alexander the Great to make Serpentor. They must have the greatest archaeology team in the world.
They did have something called the MacGuffin device. So I think they knew what they were about, son.
There's people are talking about Relic Hunter in here, and it's like, I know I saw in the rabbit warren I went down the other day. I saw how much nostalgia there is for that show. It's got a following not unlike Hercules Xena. It's crazy. I did not realize.
I did love that Hercules show.
Yeah.
So
I just wish Tawny Katane had been in the show and not just in the pilot.
Yeah.
Oh, well. I remember Wishbone.
Oh yeah, I remember Wishbone very well.
I remember Wishbone.
He was a little Jack Russell Terrier with a little bobtail, which is actually called a scut. For those that don't know, SCUT, scut is a bobtail.
See, you get quality knowledge here, and I'm not even being sarcastic. I mean, that's something you can take with you into your life.
The next time you're watching Jeopardy with the family, I got you.
Or you're at trivia night and it comes up.
Yep.
Saying. All right. Well, with that, we will plan another show that will happen very soon. We'll see you on that show. In the meantime, tell everybody where they can find you, Sal. If you, I guess you're still on hiatus, so maybe right now you're on loan to RetroBlasting exclusively.
Right.
I don't know. So,
I mean, the channel's still there. I wasted years of my life making 500 videos for some reason. But yeah, it's 2 Cents Toys. You can find me on YouTube and Instagram. I have other places, like I have a Patreon and all that, but don't go there. There's nothing there. Don't waste your money. You won't. No, it's there so no one else can come around and gank the name. That's the only reason it's there. So please don't do anything with it. But yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, places like that. But I don't use it. I barely use my YouTube channel at this point, but it is there. If you want to see a more in-depth look at all this haberdashery, it's there. So, but yeah, otherwise you can find me bipping and bopping around on other people's channels talking about this stuff. So,
well, I've been very grateful and blessed to have you on the show tonight. Thank you for finally not that you dragged it out, but that we finally came together and did this show. And it was always in the plan to talk about this stuff regularly. This wasn't ever supposed to be a one-off. Not that every episode, guys, will be called Alternative Archaeology, but it will be stuff that Sal and I like to talk about. So we will take your recommendations into account, and we will design another episode here in the near future. So
absolutely, it was a blast, a retro blast, if you will.
It's always a blast to hang out with you, Sal.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone. We will see you on the next video. Bye.